First though, online attitudes towards people with mental health problems are worst amongst the gaming community, amongst sports fans and also people who work in IT. And that's according to the anti-bullying charity Ditch the Label. They've analysed nearly 13 million online conversations that have something to do with mental health. And they found that video gamers were 10% more likely to use offensive or derogatory language when discussing mental health. Now, earlier this year, the world's highest paid YouTuber, PewDiePie, had to say sorry for using an offensive word during a live stream gameplay. He claims he was just as a slip of the tongue, but is the community taking mental health seriously enough? Or is offensive language and competitive bullying an acceptable part of the fun for some of them? Let's talk now to Emma Slade. She's an online gamer who says she's faced more abuse from females than males and thinks mental health can be disrespected on gaming platforms. Bailey Mitchell is 17 years old. He faced a lot of online bullying over multiplayer games when he was younger and says it made his anxiety worse. Also joining us, Niki Bernard, or Niki Trash, as she's known on gaming sites. She says the community needs to toughen up and that abuse as banter is commonplace. Really good to have all of you with me. Now, look, let me come to you, Emma, first. What kind of thing have you experienced and what games were you playing when you experienced it?
To be honest, I've experienced it more on console gaming, so things like my PlayStation 4 and Xbox One than PC gaming. I've been playing games like Grand Theft Auto or sports games, and that's where I've had the majority of name calling and things. I find that there's a great community out there. It's just a bit hard finding them.
And when you say they're abusing you, calling you names, how does it start? Is it, as Niki I'm sure is going to say, just banter, just part and parcel of playing games online and having the headset on and people talking and getting into the moment?
I get what she's saying, but when, especially with headset gaming, when it comes to that, there needs to be a line between banter and actual abuse, you know? Mainly it happens if you don't play very well in a video game. And I think most people who play video games have some sort of mental health illness because
most people really have mental health illnesses if they're playing video games?
I would say a lot of people, nearly everyone I know in a huge gaming community has some sort of mental health illness.
How do you know, though? How do you know that they have a mental health problem?
I've spent the last 2 years raising money for charity and being very involved in raising money for mental health. So the sphere I have around me of community have all got mental health illnesses or are very keen on supporting people.
And is this the kind of thing you would talk about during playing a game? You talk about the mental health issues you're having to deal with?
During playing games on my PlayStation and things, that's not so much really what happens because people are so more in the moment. But if you're playing a game where people can leave comments in a live stream, it's not really so banterish so much. People aren't really like that, and that's more of a space where you can talk about mental health illnesses.
Bailey, let me bring you in because you've suffered anxiety as a result of the experiences you've had when playing games online. How did that start to manifest itself?
Well, when I was about 11, I got my first console, and the main game that I sort of played on there was FIFA. And so when you're playing online on that game, you can talk to people on headsets.
Yeah.
And so when I was 11, if I had these strangers like telling me to kill myself if I score a goal, you know, it really can like sort of, you take things more literally. Obviously over time you develop and it doesn't, well, for some people it doesn't affect them as badly as others.
Because let's just clarify, because you know, we've spoken to a 13-year-old who plays the game you mentioned, FIFA, football game, online, and hasn't experienced any of this kind of thing. So just how commonplace is it?
I think it's pretty common. It sort of depends if you're playing online, if you're playing in a big game with lots of people. if you are talking, and also it's not only over headset. You can also get sent direct messages.
Right.
With you're playing with.
Just final question to you for a second, Bailey, because I wonder if you've got all these people in a room together at a party, there's inevitably going to be one or two that you probably avoid because they're saying too many things that you just don't agree with. Is it akin to that, or is it more people than that, and a way that you can't avoid it when you're playing?
Well, I think by saying just avoid it, it's kind of like it's kind of not really solving any problem. It's just hiding a big issue. I think it really varies. Sometimes there will be times where you can just avoid it. Other times you can't. Some games you can mute chat, some games you can't. And so it really depends. But again, I don't think that ignoring it is a good solution to that problem.
Niki, listening to Bailey and Emma, do you still think they should toughen up?
Well, the whole thing is so subjective to what game you're playing. If you're playing Grand Theft Auto, naturally some questionable things are going to come up, and it's how are you supposed to? You can put the mute button on for sure and try to avoid it, but it's an online community. No matter what happens, there's going to be somebody somewhere ranting about something, and people get far too easily triggered about stuff. And it's like, in a real life situation, you can't say some of these things to a person. You wouldn't say that naturally.
So what do you say online that you wouldn't say to someone's face?
Oh,
within reason. Within reason here, because we're on television, of course.
Well, I'm not PewDiePie. We'll just say that, Well, I try to keep it.
I know one word you've talked about using is the word retard, which many people find so offensive. Would you ever use that to a person's face?
For sure, if they're being ridiculously unintelligent. And that's offensive, for sure. I get it. But it's the 21st century, and I'm making it sound like I'm a terrible person here, but in the heat of the moment in a game, you don't see these people. You're not face-to-face. So it's very easy to freely say things that you wouldn't say to them face-to-face.
Does that justify it? Does that justify it, though?
No, it doesn't justify it. Definitely not, because there are people who get triggered by things, so you have to be careful. But at the same time, it's an online world, and no matter how hard you try to avoid it, sometimes maybe you should just, if you get triggered by things, like offensive language from people who are super gamers all the time playing, maybe avoid those games,
Just very quickly, Niki, I mean, you're a bit older than our other two guests, so you also have a 9-year-old yourself, and they play games, they experience this kind of language, and you're happy with that?
Well, I'm not happy with it, but at the same time, I've taught him that there's a difference between virtual reality and the things that these YouTubers say. They're grown-ups. They're not, 9-year-old kids playing Firewatch. So he knows the difference between, okay, you can't talk like that ever, not in my house, not out in reality. But watching these guys play it, he understands that, okay, they're having a rage moment and they're going to say some ridiculous stuff.
Niki, thanks to you for the second. I just want to go back to Bailey and Emma to finish off. Bailey, to you first. Have you ever fallen perhaps into the trap, as Niki says, of getting so fired up during a game that you've said things that you regret? Can you appreciate why people might do that?
I can, but at the same time, I don't think offensive language, I don't think it's the issue. I think it's what you say. So I don't think swearing is going to trigger somebody's mental health issues. I think that telling them that you're going to come find their parents or whatever is. So it's really difficult to find where it starts to become a problem. But I do think sometimes you can,
Thank you. Emma, just very briefly to you to finish off. It seems like there's obviously still a big gap between the real world and the online world. Do you think the online world finally is going to grow up a little bit here, or have to grow up to cope with this kind of thing?
I think that the online community itself will grow up itself. I think that what she said, that it's the 21st century and it's okay to call someone a retard is completely wrong, in my opinion. And I don't think that children should be exposed to games with language like that. It's not swear words, like Bailey said, that trigger people. It's the name calling and the threats.
Okay. Emma, thank you so much indeed. Bailey, Niki, thanks to you both